The fleet cut through the void in perfect formation, 100 ships gliding like cold blades across the stars. Their hulls glowed faintly with the light of conquered suns, and inside their command chambers the air was thick with the quiet confidence of species that had not known real defeat in centuries. They had long ago reduced war to a routine, more ceremony than challenge. Admiral Carthos reclined in his command throne, his scaled hands folded loosely before him. His eyes, black and unblinking, reflected the tactical display hovering in the air. It showed the charred remnants of a human listening post, still smoldering as fragments of hull spun helplessly into orbit. Another victory. Another forgettable outpost erased from the map. He barely remembered giving the order. His bridge crew exchanged dry comments, their voices tinged with a weariness born not of exhaustion, but of monotony. "One nest of vermin less to trouble the Empire," said the weapons officer, adjusting her crest of pale spines. Carthos allowed himself a thin smile. If they truly meant to resist, they would have tried harder centuries ago. These humans are a species of scavengers, too fractured to mount more than token defiance. The crew chuckled dutifully, though the laughter was hollow. War had become theater, a show stage for their own sense of superiority. And yet, beneath the admiral's calm exterior, a thought gnawed at him. Scattered reports spoke of colonies that had vanished, fleets that had not been found, signals that went silent without explanation. It was dismissed at high command as human incompetence. He wasn't so sure. "Admiral," the navigation officer interrupted, her tone shifting with restrained urgency. "We've intercepted a signal. Weak, fragmented, but carrying unmistakable human coding." The admiral's gaze sharpened. "Location." A cluster of stars bloomed on the display, deep in a sector long charted as barren. A backwater no Empire ship had reason to patrol. The officer continued, "Is not on any registry. A colony, perhaps. Primitive, cut off for centuries. No defenses of note, if the scans are accurate." Carthos leaned forward, the faintest glimmer of interest breaking through his habitual disdain. A forgotten human colony. A relic. The council would be eager to see it claimed, its people bent or broken, its secrets laid bare. "Set course," he said. His voice carried the finality of ritual. "We will bring this hidden nest into the light." The fleet bent toward its prey. When they arrived, Carthos felt an unexpected chill. The world that unfolded on the view screens was not what he had expected. A green jewel suspended against the black, its continents lined with cities that glowed faintly in the night. Too many lights for a forgotten outpost. Too much symmetry in the orbital lanes. Still, the scans returned no evidence of heavy armament. No fleet, no planetary shields. Only silence and the pulse of a thriving, seemingly defenseless population. On the bridge, his crew muttered with satisfaction. "Another lost tribe of primitives," one officer said, already drafting the conquest report. "Barely worth a skirmish," another added. Carthos did not join their amusement. The silence of the planet unsettled him. No panic transmissions, no cries for help. Just a quiet, watchful stillness. He ordered a landing party dispatched with the ceremonial flourish expected of him. The dropships cut through the atmosphere, descending toward the capital that gleamed along a wide river. The city looked orderly, its towers built with clean geometry and deliberate precision. Not a ruined relic, but something cultivated, maintained. As the dropships touched down in the central plaza, the alien soldiers fanned out, weapons gleaming in the bright sunlight. Civilians gathered to watch, their expressions unreadable. There was no screaming, no desperate scattering into the shadows. Instead, they stood in disciplined rows, their faces calm, their eyes fixed on intruders with something unsettling, an absence of fear. The alien commander, leading the landing party, raised his voice through a translator. "By order of the Threxian Empire, this colony is now under imperial dominion. Lay down your arms and submit, and you will be permitted to serve." From the crowd, a single figure stepped forward. A woman tall, dressed in simple gray fabric. She carried no weapon, but her posture was one of command. Her voice, when she spoke, was low and even, carrying across the plaza with uncanny clarity. "You believe you are conquerors," she said, "but you have already made your last mistake." The alien commander laughed sharply, raising his weapon in mock salute. Bold words for livestock. The woman's expression did not change. She looked beyond him, to the hovering ships, to the cameras streaming the event back to orbit. Her gaze seemed to pierce through metal and vacuum alike. "Tell your admiral," she continued, that we've been waiting. Tell him that every raid, every colony you burned, every insult you thought forgotten was calculated into this moment. You are not the hunters here. You are the bait." Before the commander could respond, the ground beneath the plaza trembled. Panels disguised as stone split open, and massive arrays of machinery rose silently into place. Towers unfolded like blades, their surfaces alive with energy. The soldiers aimed their weapons instinctively, but the machinery was already locked onto targets far above. On the orbiting flagship, Carthos rose from his throne as alarms erupted across the bridge. The tactical display lit with sudden spikes of energy, defense grids, hidden weapon systems buried under the surface of what had seemed an undefended world. "Admiral," the weapons officer cried. "Multiple batteries powering up, unregistered technology, advanced signatures." Carthos narrowed his eyes, the faint smile gone. His crew scrambled, shouting over one another in disbelief, but his mind was clear. The humans had been waiting. They had prepared. The woman in the plaza looked up into the sky, her voice carrying on unseen channels, calm and unwavering. "You wanted conquest. You wanted submission. But you've walked willingly into the lion's den. And lions, Admiral, do not forgive." The alien commander barked for her arrest, but before his soldiers could move, the defense grid released a pulse that lit the horizon. Orbital sensors screamed with interference as targeting locks fell across the fleet. On the flagship, silence fell. The bridge crew looked to their admiral, eyes wide with something they had not felt in generations. Fear. Carthos's claws tightened against the arms of his throne. For the first time in a long career of effortless victories, he felt the balance tilt, not toward routine conquest, but toward the unknown. The colony had been waiting. The humans had been watching. And the trap had just been sprung. The Phyrexian fleet emerged from the darkness between stars like a storm front, their formation sharp and precise, engines humming with the efficiency of long practice. To the crew aboard those vessels, this was another day, another conquest. They did not expect resistance, nor did they fear it. Conquest was their heritage, their identity. In the silence of the bridge, it felt less like war and more like routine housekeeping. Admiral Carthos sat at the center of it all, encased in the cool glow of tactical displays. He had commanded for decades, and though victories filled the record of his life, they carried little meaning now. He had grown accustomed to ease. To strike at humans was like striking at drifting embers, brief flickers of heat, then nothing. Yet behind his calm exterior, a cautious instinct unsettled him, whispering that the prey might not be as helpless as the council believed. That whisper he kept to himself. To voice it would invite mockery, and the admiral had no interest in becoming a target of ridicule among his peers. The wreckage of a human listening post hung before him, fragments of metal slowly turning in orbit. His weapons officer studied the scene with contempt. "It's always the same, Admiral. They spread too far, too thin, and we pluck them apart like carrion birds. I almost wish they'd resist, if only to make this interesting." "Careful what you wish for," Carthos replied quietly. His tone carried neither threat nor humor, but the officer faltered, unsettled by the weight of it. He turned back to his console without another word. A signal broke the silence. Weak, faint, almost dismissed as static, yet undeniably human. The navigation officer's crest flickered with interest as she traced the origin. "Coordinates detected. Outer Rim sector. A planet unlisted on our charts." Carthos leaned forward. "Alive." "Very much so. Strong biosignatures. Large settlements. But no fleet, no planetary defenses of note. Strange, considering the population density. A forgotten colony. One that should not have survived, yet somehow endured outside the reach of the Empire. The Council would see glory in its rediscovery. Carthos saw something else, opportunity or danger, depending on what awaited them. He gave the order without flourish, his words clipped and final. "Set course. We will bring this world into the fold." The journey ended with the world blooming across the view screens, a sphere of deep oceans and fertile continents. At first glance, it appeared serene, its cities woven into the land with deliberate artistry. The scans told a different story. Population dense, technology advanced, yet no defensive arrays detected. No warships in orbit. No signs of desperation or collapse. Just silence. On the bridge, officers murmured with satisfaction. Another world to add to their tally. Another human nest crushed. Carthos alone felt unease. Silence in the face of invasion was not weakness. It was intent. He ordered a ceremonial landing. Dropships pierced the atmosphere, their descent unopposed. The capital below was a vast expanse of ordered towers and broad avenues, its design purposeful, as though anticipating the day when outsiders would arrive. Civilians gathered in the plaza where the ships touched down. They did not scatter. They did not beg. Their stillness was unnerving, a collective gaze that weighed heavier than any weapon. The ground commander, armored and brash, addressed them with the arrogance of his rank. By decree of the Phyrexian Empire, this world is ours. Submit, and you may yet serve with purpose. His translator bellowed the words across the square. From the crowd, a woman stepped forward. She wore no armor, no insignia, only a plain uniform marked with a subtle emblem. Her presence silenced even the murmur of her people. Her eyes were dark, steady, and unafraid as she faced the invaders. "You assume this colony has been lost," she said, her voice measured, each word deliberate. "You assume we have lived hidden in weakness, waiting for the inevitable. That assumption is your undoing." The commander smirked, weapon raised in casual threat. "You mistake defiance for strength. Do you think words will turn aside the Empire?" She did not blink. "This colony has been preparing since before your fleets darkened the stars. We have studied you. We have calculated your movements. And we have waited for this moment, knowing arrogance would deliver you here." The commander laughed, a sharp sound that echoed against the buildings. "Bold for cattle." He gestured, and his troops moved to seize her. Before they reached her, the ground trembled. Panels hidden beneath the plaza split apart, revealing massive structures that rose like awakened beasts. Gleaming towers of steel and composite unfolded, their surfaces alive with pulsing energy. The soldiers froze. The crowd did not move. They had been expecting this, rehearsing it, living with it in secret for generations. In orbit, alarms flared across the flagship. Carthos rose from his throne as streams of data flooded the displays. Hidden weapon grids activated across the planet, locking onto the fleet with precision. Energy spikes surged where scans had once shown nothing. "Impossible," muttered his weapons officer. "These signatures, how did they conceal them?" Carthos said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the display, the patterns unfolding not with desperation, but with design. This was not a last defense hastily raised. This was a trap laid with patience. On the planet's surface, the woman's voice carried once more, transmitted now on frequencies meant for him alone. "You believe yourselves hunters, but you are the quarry. You walked willingly into our jaws, and there will be no escape." Her tone was not boastful. It was calm, assured, like a teacher explaining an inevitable lesson. Carthos felt the bridge crew watching him, their eyes wide with disbelief, their confidence cracking. He alone did not move, though inside he understood what this meant. Humanity was not scattered. Humanity was not broken. They had been waiting, shaping themselves into a weapon, while the Empire mocked their ruins. The plaza towers locked into place, and beams of light streaked upward, piercing the clouds. Orbitals flared with alarms as targeting locks painted the Phyrexian ships, one by one. The humans had revealed themselves, not as survivors clinging to scraps, but as predators unveiling claws. Carthos's claws dug into the arms of his throne. For the first time in centuries, he felt the fragile weight of mortality pressing down on his kind. The trap was sprung, and the galaxy would never be the same. The council chamber of the Phyrexian High Command was a cathedral of arrogance, every wall lined with banners of conquest, every surface gleaming as if polished by victory itself. Yet the air inside was thick with unease. Holographic projections of the lost colony hovered above the central table, images of weapon towers, human fleets materializing from wormholes, and the calm, implacable faces of those who had stood unafraid beneath alien guns. Admiral Carthos stood before the gathered ministers, his scaled armor still scarred from the recent engagement. He spoke without flourish, his tone deliberate and grave. "You sent me to erase a forgotten remnant of humanity. Instead, I found a fortress disguised as a village. They possess wormhole technology superior to anything in our arsenal. Their fleets move with precision we cannot match. If this is what they have been hiding, then the Empire is already in jeopardy." The council erupted in overlapping voices, some sharp with alarm, others dismissive with scorn. One minister, her crest shimmering with irritation, waved a hand as though brushing dust from silk. "You exaggerate, Admiral. They are scavengers who stumbled upon lost machines. Once the fleet regroups, we will crush them, as we always have. Carthos's jaw tightened. He wanted to snarl, but instead he let silence stretch, forcing their eyes on him. I have seen them. They were not surprised by our arrival. They orchestrated it. They wanted us there. Do you not understand? They are not scavengers. They are students of war. Their entire history is one unbroken lesson in destruction. An elder counselor leaned forward, voice steady but condescending. And you suggest, Admiral, that this feral race is more dangerous than the Empire itself. I do not suggest it, Carthos said, his claws flexing against the table. I declare it. The chamber froze at his boldness. For a heartbeat, Carthos thought he had overreached, that they would strip him of command for daring to undermine their narrative. But then a murmur spread among them, softer, edged with doubt. A few eyes dropped from his stare, unwilling to meet the conviction there. Yet just as quickly, denial surged back. Fear has clouded your judgment, another minister snapped. The Phyrexian fleet is unmatched. These humans may sting, but they cannot overthrow an empire. Carthos felt the old despair settle in. The ministers had grown fat on conquest. They had forgotten what it was to face a true enemy. He knew words would not break their complacency. Only blood would. When the meeting dissolved into political bickering, he left without ceremony, his cloak trailing like a shadow across the marble floor. Back aboard his flagship, the mood was different. His officers no longer carried themselves with easy superiority. They were restless, speaking in hushed tones, some avoiding his gaze altogether. They had seen what he had seen, the humans' control of the battlefield, the efficiency of their drones, the calm menace in their voices. In the war room, Carthos stood before the fleet commanders under his authority. Holographic stars filled the chamber, marking the front lines of the Empire's reach. He gestured, and one by one, sectors lit up with human activity, colonies thought abandoned, voids thought empty, now suspected staging grounds. They have built in our blind spots, he said. They have seeded the galaxy with traps, preparing for us. Every raid we thought was victory was them shaping our arrogance. They want us overextended. They want us predictable. One commander slammed his fist against the console. Then we strike now. Mobilize every ship, burn every suspected colony to ash before they tighten the noose. Carthos shook his head. That is exactly what they want. They anticipate reckless retaliation. They will bleed us dry, one fleet at a time, until the Empire collapses from within. Silence stretched heavy, broken only by the hum of the star maps. Finally, a younger officer asked, voice tight with unease, Admiral, what do you propose? Carthos stared at the map, his mind a storm of calculations. He could not yet see the winning move, only the certainty that their enemies were already playing several steps ahead. On the surface of the human colony, far below the orbit where his fleet once hovered, another council convened. Not gilded ministers, but hardened leaders dressed in simple uniforms. The woman who had faced the aliens in the plaza now stood at their head, her presence commanding without ornament. Our adversaries will not retreat quietly, she said. Their pride will not allow it. They will come with everything they have, believing numbers and brute force will prevail. Around her, the leaders nodded, some grim, others fierce with anticipation. One man spoke, voice edged with restrained eagerness. Then we bleed them where they are strongest. Show them their fleets are nothing before ours. She shook her head, the faintest trace of a smile curving her lips. No, not yet. Patience is still our weapon. They must believe victory is within reach before we take it away. That is how you break an empire, not with one battle, but with despair. Her words resonated with the room, a shared understanding binding them. For centuries, humanity had been underestimated, dismissed as fractured, weak, disorganized. Now their strength lay not only in weapons, but in the long, bitter patience of a species forged in fire. Back aboard his flagship, Carthos found himself replaying the human broadcasts in private. Footage of wars long past filled his chamber. Soldiers digging trenches in mud, fleets burning across void, civilians rebuilding shattered cities again and again. He watched with morbid fascination as they endured horrors his people had never faced, and not only endured, but grew stronger through them. He understood what his council could not. The humans did not simply fight wars. They survived them. And survival was a sharper weapon than conquest. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened screen, eyes hollow, shoulders bowed under the weight of realization. The Empire was not prepared for this kind of enemy. He wondered if it could ever be. When the order came days later, it was exactly as he had feared. The Council, ignoring his warnings, declared a full mobilization. Hundreds of ships were gathered, a vast fleet meant to crush the humans in one decisive blow. Carthos stood at the viewport as the armada assembled, line after line of gleaming warships filling the stars. His officers moved with mechanical efficiency, but he could see the unease in their faces. They remembered the trap at the colony. They remembered the calm voice over the comms, the promise that the age of certainty was finished. He wanted to tell them they would prevail, that the Empire's strength was enough. But he was not a liar, and he would not insult them with hollow words. Instead, he said only, "Prepare yourselves. They will not fight as we do. They will not meet us head-on. They will strike where we are weakest. And when they do, we must endure or we will not endure at all." The younger officers exchanged nervous glances. Some looked away, unwilling to hold the Admiral's gaze. Yet in the silence that followed, a grim determination settled over them. The fleet burned toward the coordinates of the human stronghold, the stars themselves trembling under the weight of their engines. Carthos remained still, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the endless black ahead. Yet he also knew there was no turning back. The armada stretched across the void, a lattice of steel and firepower that had once been enough to cow whole civilizations. Now it advanced into silence, engines flaring like a constellation born in motion. Admiral Carthos stood on the bridge of his flagship, every nerve taut, every instinct screaming that this was not a march to victory, but to revelation. His officers moved with forced efficiency, but their voices betrayed them, hushed, uneven, laced with dread. The stars ahead warped. At first it looked like a trick of the sensors, a ripple across the dark. Then the void tore open, and human ships poured through wormholes like phantoms returning home. They emerged without haste, without flourish, sliding into formation as though the battlefield had already been claimed. Their hulls reflected no starlight, absorbing it instead, as if even the galaxy conspired to keep them hidden. The Phyrexian fleet faltered, momentum stalling. The sheer composure of the human formation was suffocating, like prey discovering it had been cornered by predators that no longer needed to chase. Carthos's claws bit into the railing as he barked for weapons to ready, for formations to hold. His voice steadied the crew, though inside his chest the truth coiled tighter. This was not a battle the Empire could win. The first strike came not as fire but as silence. Communications collapsed, replaced by false signals. Navigation grids bent in on themselves, ships turning unknowingly into one another's firing arcs. The humans had learned their systems, infiltrated their networks, rewritten their confidence line by line. Before the first missile left its bay, the Empire was already bleeding. Then the sky ignited. Human drones, invisible until they chose to reveal themselves, shredded escorts with pinpoint precision. Cruisers folded under kinetic bombardments that struck with surgical accuracy. Orbital mines, seeded days before, blossomed like flowers of annihilation among the Phyrexian vanguard. Carthos roared orders, dragging his fleet into counterattack. For a moment they pushed back, sheer numbers forcing holes into human lines. Ships burned, debris scattered like ash across the void. But each push was answered with impossible speed. Human vessels appeared where no scans had registered them, emerging from wormholes at impossible angles, striking and vanishing before counterfire could land. It was not a battle. It was a dismantling. On his display, Carthos saw his fleet fracture. Units that had fought together for decades now turned isolated, their signals cut, their strength divided. He slammed his fist into the console. "Regroup. Do not give them the field." His officers scrambled to comply, but he saw the despair in their eyes. And then the humans spoke again. A voice, calm, unhurried, cutting across every channel. "You were told this would be your last mistake. You refused to believe it. Now you learn." The bridge crew froze as the words settled over them, not shouted but delivered with the weight of inevitability. Carthos's chest tightened. He recognized the voice. It was the same woman from the plaza, now speaking not as a defiant colonist, but as the face of something far greater. "We do not seek your extinction," she said. "But understand this, your empire's age of conquest is over. Every star you thought yours has already been marked. Every weakness you never acknowledged has been exploited. You are not our masters. You are our proof." As if punctuating her words, the human fleet shifted. Entire wings moved in perfect synchrony, encircling what remained of the Phyrexian formation. Weapons locked not with reckless hunger, but with deliberate patience, as though the humans were offering them a choice. Carthos drew in a long breath. He felt the weight of centuries pressing down, the arrogance of his council, the blindness of a people who had mistaken dominance for invincibility. He looked at his officers, their eyes wide with terror, waiting for him to tell them they would live. He thought of the footage he had watched, humans clawing out survival in mud, rising from ashes again and again, never broken. He thought of his own people, who had never been tested, who had grown soft while convincing themselves they were strong. The truth was as bitter as it was undeniable. With deliberate calm, he lowered his voice. "Transmit surrender protocols." Gasps rippled through the bridge. Some officers recoiled, others looked at him in stunned relief. One demanded, "Admiral, we cannot." "We can," Carthos cut in, his tone carrying iron. "And we will. I will not feed what remains of our fleet into the maw of inevitability. They have already won. Our only choice is how much of us remains to see the dawn." Silence followed, broken only by the clicking of consoles as the order was carried out. Across the battlefield, Phyrexian weapons went dark, ships halting their desperate maneuvers. The human fleet held position, silent but watchful. Then slowly their weapons powered down in return, not as a gesture of trust, but as a statement of control. A single transmission came through. The woman's face appeared, steady and unreadable. She regarded Carthos not with triumph, but with something far more disquieting: respect. "You understand," she said. "That is why you will live. We have no interest in slaughtering those who recognize the truth. You will return to your people. You will speak for us. And you will govern what remains under our terms." Carthos bowed his head, not in shame but in acknowledgement. He had been spared not by weakness, but by a strength so absolute it had no need for cruelty. Humanity did not gloat. They did not revel. They simply stood as masters who no longer needed to prove themselves. As the calm closed, Carthos looked once more at the human fleet, now dispersing with silent precision. His heart twisted with something he had not felt in a lifetime of war or reverence. Later, alone in his chamber, he whispered to himself, "We thought them scattered embers. But they were the fire waiting for air." Far beyond, on the colony that had sprung the trap, the woman stood once more in the plaza, her people gathered in quiet unity. She looked toward the stars, her face unreadable, her voice soft but resolute. "We did not seek this war," she murmured, "but now it is ours. The galaxy will learn, as they have learned, that humanity does not bow." And with that, the balance of power across the stars shifted forever, not with the roar of conquest, but with the silence of inevitability.